Okay, hello everyone. I'm just going to give it a few seconds to let all of our attendees join. Just going to give it 60 seconds. We will be starting the webinar shortly. Just wait a little bit more so that everyone can join us. Okay, so I might get started for the day. So before I start, I would like to say that WIN acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So I would love to welcome everyone to today's webinar about careers in nuclear. Women in Nuclear Australia Incorporated, or WIN, is extremely excited to be sharing this webinar with you today. In case you're not familiar with WIN, if you've never heard of us before, we're a not-for-profit association of women and individuals of other genders who work professionally in various fields of nuclear technology and radiological applications in Australia. One of the aims of WIN is to promote understanding and public awareness of the benefits and peaceful uses of nuclear and radiological applications in Australia, especially among women and young people. WIN is an international organisation with members from over 100 countries. So today's webinar is supported by Inspiring Australia as part of National Science Week. WIN Australia would like to thank our sponsor, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, ANSTO, for its ongoing support of WIN Australia and its objectives. WIN would also like to acknowledge the ongoing support of the Australian Institute of Nuclear Science and Engineering, or ANSTO. So this webinar is the third in a series of 4 webinars for National Science Week being hosted by WIN. So my name is Lillian and I am an executive member of WIN. I also work for the Australian Institute of Nuclear Science and Engineering, and I'm in the middle of an honours research project at ANSTO. So today's webinar has 2 main purposes, depending on what your background is. If you don't know too much about nuclear, this webinar is going to inform you about a huge variety of jobs that exist in the nuclear space. However, if you're a student, this webinar also serves as a good opportunity for you to get some insight into how you can work towards a career in nuclear. For today, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask us questions. Please remember to be kind and respectful to our guests. And if you see questions that have already been asked that you really want answered, you can upvote them by clicking the thumbs up button. We would like to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to those who are unable to attend today, and it may be used by WIN for promotional purposes. So no one in the audience is visible to us today. You can see us, but we actually can't see you. So you do not need to worry about being captured in this recording. It's just us panelists who are caught on camera. Okay, so today we are hosting a panel style event and we have 4 panelists with us. We have Julie Murray from ARPANSA. We have Dr. Sharuna Naidu from Liverpool Hospital. We have Tim Rownes from Fennovoima. He's going to tell you what that means. And we have Katrina Van Deven from ANSTO. So that is all I would like to tell you about everyone today. I'm going to get them to give themselves a better introduction and tell you what that introduction means. So I'm just going to go through everyone in the order that I see on my screen. And I would love it if each of you could tell the audience where you work, what your job title is, and what those words in that job title means. I'm really sorry, Tim, but you're first on my screen.
Lucky me. Can you hear me? Yeah, beauty. All right, so my name's Tim Rownes. As you mentioned, my job title is Operation Planning Engineer. I work at Fennovoima It's Finnish, basically means Finnish power. And it's a new build nuclear power company. So we're constructing VVR 1200 reactor at Pyhäjoki, which is about halfway up Finland on the west coast. So pretty far north, plenty of snow in the winter time. And operation planning engineer for me means that, so our project is in the licensing phase now. We don't have a plant yet, but we're applying for a construction license to build the nuclear power plant. So we're reviewing the design documentation and preparing the safety analysis report, the license application. And my background is in operations and maintenance at ANSTO in Australia, so I'm providing operations input on that.
So I have a feeling Lillian might have dropped out. So we might move across. Julie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. How is everybody? Thank you so much for the invitation to chat today. I do have a very interesting job. I just want to, can everybody see the screen, I hope?
Yep.
Oh, excellent. All right, so just very, very briefly, I work for the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, specifically within the Regulatory Services branch. My role is a Senior Radiation Security Advisor and Major Projects Manager. But just very, very briefly, I just wanted to touch on the fact that Reg Services branch role is to independently regulate the use of radiation by Commonwealth agencies. And those regulatory activities include licensing, compliance, inspection, and enforcement. My main role is largely around managing ARPANSA's role in the site identification process for the National Radioactive Waste Management Facility, which the government is going through right now, as well as providing security advice to lead inspectors within the facility safety section where I actually live.
I'm really sorry, everyone. I dropped out there. That was terrifying. I assume that Julie just gave her introduction to herself. Yep. Were you finished, Julie? Yep.
I hope so. Yes, I was.
Thank you very much for that. Really sorry. Were we up to Katrina?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. As Lillian mentioned, my name is Katrina Van Deven and I work in the Government and International Affairs team at ANSTO. So my role in the team really straddles both government engagement, but also engagement with ANSTO's bilateral and multilateral partners. So if I try and break this down a little bit, on the government side of the fence, our team does day-to-day engagement with our responsible ministers' offices. So we report into the Honourable Karen Andrews MP as our Primary Minister. We also have the Honourable Keith Pitt MP, which is for radioactive waste management, which is obviously Julie's area of expertise. We also support ANSTO in participating in parliamentary hearings, estimates hearings, which is part of the budgetary process, and really just any political engagement. So in a pre-COVID world, typically we'd run different events throughout the year to engage with our political stakeholders, sometimes in Sydney, Canberra, etc., to tell them about some of the exciting projects that ANSTO had coming up. But that's obviously part of our role that's a little on pause at the moment. And in the government affairs space, I'm particularly involved with the planning for ANSTO's Innovation Precinct. So this is really one of our landmark projects at ANSTO. At our Lucas Heights campus, we're building a precinct which brings together an innovation incubator called Nandon, which is up and running and has already 20 startups located in it, a graduate institute. So we've already got our first tranche of graduate institute scholars in place. And finally, a technology park, which will be, I guess, the slightly later development to come to that precinct. And then on the international side of the fence, I mainly do bilateral work in the Indo-Pacific region. So I've had a lot of dealings with Singapore. I've done some work with China, but also Sri Lanka, interestingly enough, because that's probably something that doesn't come front of mind necessarily. But ANSTO has a really interesting relationship with the Sri Lankan government where we're helping them to investigate chronic kidney disease of unknown cause. So this is a major non-communicable disease. It's present not just in Sri Lanka, but developing countries all over the world. So we are really working with them to sort of understand the etiology of this disease. And we're really proud that that's funded by Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks Katrina. Katrina is a really good example of what people might not think of when you think of working in nuclear. So we're really glad to have you on board. We're really glad to have everyone on board today. Sharuna, I guess it's your turn.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me to speak today. So my job is basically in nuclear medicine, but very specifically in radiopharmaceuticals. So for anyone who doesn't know, a radiopharmaceutical is basically a medicine with a radioactive component that's coupled onto it, and then it's injected into a patient to diagnose or treat a specific disease. The radioactive medicines that we use on patients are typically delivered as an injection into the patient, and then they distribute within the patient's body and they localize in an organ of interest. Because the medicines are radioactive, once they've localized in an organ, they emit radiation as gamma rays or as particles, which are then detected on specialized equipment, which a physician can use to diagnose or to give them an indication of how a particular organ is functioning, or to diagnose a disease or treat some kind of illness. So there's many interesting challenges around the safe manufacture of radiopharmaceuticals. It's interesting because you have to have the considerations of the radioactive nature of the drug and the safe handling practices around it. But also in typical medicine manufacture, there's many stages and components of the manufacturing process that you have to control and monitor in order to ensure the high quality standard of the product that you're manufacturing. When you try and apply these to radiopharmaceuticals, it gets a little bit tricky because your product or your medicine is constantly decaying into something else. So you have to adapt your testing or adapt your investigation of the product to account for the radioactive decay and the constantly changing nature of the product as well. The compromise is generally accepted by the regulators as long as we can take appropriate safety measures to ensure that we have a consistently high standard of product. And that's where my role specifically comes in as a quality manager. It's my role to look at the all of the manufacturing environment as a whole and all of the parameters around the product that we've manufactured to make sure that when it's injected into a patient, it's still safe for use in that patient, and it's going to give us some diagnostic relevant information as well.
Fantastic, thank you very much. We're very glad to have you join us. So for the Q&A part of today, I really encourage anyone with any kind of questions to any of our guests to use the Q&A function, pop it in. But I do have a list of questions that I would like to work through. But I prioritize the questions of our audience, so please do send them through. Don't hesitate to send them through. So we have one question in the chat already that actually perfectly aligns with the questions that I wanted to ask. One of our members have asked, could you give an idea of a typical workday in your roles and what tasks do you often do in them? So I think that's a perfect question. I think we'll ask everyone to have a go at answering that. Tim, would you like to have a go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I can kick us off again. So it's been interesting with this move to sort of remote work. I work on my laptop and I work remotely, or have been since April. So back in April, I was able to do my job with a bit of a time zone difference from Australia. And at the moment I'm working from Paris. Basically at this licensing stage of our project, I'm working on a few different, I have a few different responsibility areas. One is review of the basic design for the plant. So we receive different packages of systems, process and instrumentation diagrams, system descriptions for many of the hundreds of different reactor systems. And we review those from a perspective, from operations and maintenance perspective. Can we operate it safely? Can we maintain it efficiently? And as well, preparation for the next stage of basic design, which is another level of detail more than we're looking at now. I'm working on the safety analysis report. So I'm writing a sub-chapter in chapter 13 about the future operating organisation. We need to convince the regulator here in Finland, STUK, that we're going to have an organisation that can safely operate Hanhikivi 1 nuclear power plant, and reviewing the system descriptions that are in the safety analysis report as well. I'm responsible for layout review, so we've prepared this year with our supplier from Russia, Rosatom, maintainability demonstrations. So we've got this awesome 3D model of the plant, and we're able to do sort of cross sections looking at different systems in the plant. We're able to see what the layout looks like already now, long before we've built anything, and try and understand how we do maintenance on, at this stage, the largest components on each floor of the different buildings in the power plant. So those meetings are ongoing now. And finally, one of my pet topics is load following. So in order to integrate the production of the nuclear power plant, which traditionally nuclear power plants run at full power all the time, but with an increasing penetration of renewables on the grid, it can be beneficial for the plant to ramp power up and down in response to what's happening with flexible generation on the grid. So that's a project that we're going to be looking at through the whole design and construction of the plant, is preparing for the plant to be able to do load following.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. The order changed since I dropped out, so now Sharuna, you're next.
Okay, so my day is actually really structured and a little bit routine every day. Because we're making a radiopharmaceutical that's going to be injected into a patient, it's a responsibility of the authorized person, which is typically within quality, to release the product before it gets injected into a patient. So basically what we're doing is reviewing all of the parameters around manufacturing, from how the facility was functioning, the equipment, the product that we made, and the test results for that product, and confirming that they comply with within the parameters that we had validated for the manufacture of this product. So at the start of every day, so the other thing is that radiopharmaceuticals, like I said, are very time sensitive. So they're made on the day that they're going to be used in the patient. So my typical day starts at around 6 o'clock in the morning to review the batch record of the radiopharmaceuticals that were made in the early hours in the morning. If everything's okay with that, then I sign off a release certificate that goes out to the users of that radiopharmaceutical as it's in transit. And then obviously if anything hasn't gone perfectly to plan, then the rest of my day is around investigating what went wrong, what's going to be the impact, is it going to be safe to use, how are we going to correct these errors. If in a perfect world nothing goes wrong, then the rest of my day is around either responding to questions from the regulator that we might have, looking for trends in some data or how we can make improvements, and following up on any maintenance and changes that have happened within the facility.
Great, thank you. Julie, you're next.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so my job is so multifaceted, it's wonderful. And I also do work from home, 3 days a week and 2 days in the office. So life has been a little bit different in terms of speaking with your work colleagues from a day-to-day basis. However, my day can cover anything from developing or drafting new project documentation on the National Radioactive Waste Management Facility, including undertaking resource analysis of project resources, both current and looking at any gaps in current resourcing or expertise for the future, reviewing project plans and timelines, taking care of budgets, all the fun things. I also advise quite heavily with regulatory staff on security matters for licence holders. So all of the Commonwealth licence holders like ANSTO, the CSIRO, and Department of Defence, just to name a few, I would provide security advice in terms of the licensing component of that. I would also assist the lead inspectors or the regulatory officers undertake inspections. So there's a fair bit of work that goes into preparing for inspections, and depending what sort of elements they will be inspecting on the day or over the week, I would provide advice to. And that would obviously entail conducting the inspection or alongside being an alternate inspector, as well as writing reports and assessments, peer reviewing afterwards. What else? Gosh, I review reports right across the board. I respond to public inquiries for regulatory matters, particularly I liaise with state and territory governments, at least weekly, and of course other government agencies that we obviously do a fair bit of work with. And there's so much more. That's why my job is so wonderful, because it's just so challenging, yet wonderful.
That's awesome. Thanks, Julie. Okay, Katrina, what's your day look like?
Thanks, Lillian. I'm going to give that eternally frustrating response and say no 2 days are the same. Doesn't quite hold with COVID, because I'm doing a lot of walking back and forth to my kitchen to get tea and patting the dogs. But in terms of the actual substantive work, I guess it splits into a couple of different categories. So we've got in the government space, obviously things tend to be quite dynamic. Governments can make a policy decision, for instance, and there can be some flow-on effects that we need to help the organisation prepare to respond to. So there's a piece of my job that sometimes, when you wake up in the morning, you don't know quite what's coming. And I love that. I love being responsive. I love helping the organisation, I guess, do what it needs to do to stay on track. But I think for me, the exciting part is really the planned work around stakeholder engagement. So this cuts across both my government and international affairs roles, but I'm a people person at heart. So certainly pre-COVID, a lot of my job was spending a bit of time in Canberra. I do convene a forum called the Research Agencies Meeting. So it's a really unique consultative forum that brings together both research agencies, government departments, and also research entities external to government. So you can think like academies, research academies, Science and Technology Australia, ATSI are in there too. So it's a really great opportunity to connect with the broader research ecosystem and understand everyone's priorities and challenges, etc. Also, obviously, collaborating with bilateral counterparts is really exciting. Sometimes the time difference doesn't quite work out. But, thankfully doing a lot of work with Sri Lanka. I had a webinar yesterday afternoon, and that was not too bad because they're only 5.5 hours behind Sydney at the moment. So yeah, that's about it.
Thanks for that. So I'm going to take a dive into the chat now, which is great because we have quite a few questions in there. I will just mention, so there's a few questions that are quite specific, and I'm going to focus on the career questions. But if you have something that you really want answered and we don't get to it today, please email us at winaustralia@gmail.com and we can get you in touch with the right person to answer that question. So please don't be disheartened if we don't get to your question today. So we have a question. What advice would you give to young professionals who are interested in multiple industries and are unsure of where their unique skill sets would be best suited? That's a fantastic question. Does anyone particularly want to tackle that first? Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, look, getting, at least for me in this stage of my career, I was fortunate enough to know kind of what I wanted to do with nuclear. But I would say just get whatever experience you can. Like I worked in a mining site in southeast Queensland for my industrial training for engineering, and that was a fantastic kick-off into working at ANSTO, which is my first sort of full-time job. So I would say it's long-term, probably not that. It doesn't really matter where you get the experience, but try and get out there and try and get some experience on something.
Yep, I second that. I have so much that I could add to this as well, but I'll go to Katrina. This is about the guests, not me.
So I do apologise, Lillian, because I feel like you've heard this story before, but I think my headline advice would be similar to Tim's comments. Go out there, get experience. So my, I guess, professional journey to date has been varied. So I initially started out studying in psychology, so that's what my honours degree's in. I worked in politics for a couple of years up in Queensland, went and did my master's in international relations, and then went, because I've always loved multilateralism, so I went and interned with Foreign Affairs and Trade in New York at the United Nations. Got a little bit of negotiation experience, but actually one of the negotiations that I was part of over there was pertaining to UNSCIA. So some of you might be familiar. UNSCIA is the UN Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. So I had a little bit of an insight into, wow, nuclear is actually really dynamic, really interesting. And then when I came back to Australia, it was just, you know, almost this natural fit. This role came up at ANSTO, which spoke to my political experience, my international experience, and then also that sort of thirst I had to learn more about nuclear. But point being, I never went to New York saying I'm going to end up in a nuclear organization. You know, it was to learn more about the working methods of the United Nations. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't always get caught up in thinking that you have to have the end goal defined. I think right at the start of my career, that stressed me out a little bit, like, where am I ultimately going to end up? Whereas now I think I'm much more in the mindset of take the opportunity that sounds interesting, that I really want to engage with. And I've been really lucky that almost organically out of that, I've found an opportunity that's been a real passion for me.
I think I need to take some of that advice myself. Thanks, Katrina. Julie?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to echo Katrina's sentiment in terms of I came from, you know, a background, a sporting background, and the word nuclear didn't even, you know, sort of fit into any sort of idea of where I was going. And getting this vast or broad experience across a range of areas, what interested me at the time, sort of directed me, and I just took different pathways as I became interested in varying subject matter. But I would say the sort of turning point was when you'll find that there's a turning point where you say that's my niche, that's what I want to do. And even within that, so I was very, very interested in national security. I finished playing professional football. I came back and I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I was interested in national football. Applied for a job at the Department of Defence, and all of a sudden found myself as a protective security advisor, you know, those sorts of things. And then, you know, 5 years later, ARPANSA were looking to recruit or establish a new security team within their regulatory services branch, those sorts of things. So that's how things sort of evolve sort of organically with you go, oh, okay, so there's a new role, and that's where I want to be, and that's where I've stayed ever since, because it's incredibly interesting. The work is incredibly diverse, just in my own role, let alone RSB or ARPANSA, let alone the nuclear field, full stop. So don't be rushed into finding a career right now. Look at what you love doing, and that will actually take you along a pretty fun but challenging and inviting journey.
Thanks, Julie. I can't help myself. I have to add to that. I think we've all a little bit discussed that you need to go get experience and try things to see if it's what you like. And it's easy to say that, but how do you actually secure that experience to try? And my advice in this situation is always, to every student ever, reach out. If there is a company that you think is really cool and they don't have internships running at the moment. How can I get experience with them? Email them and ask them if you can come follow someone around for the day. Email them and ask if you can have a Zoom meeting with them and talk about what they do. Ask family members and friends and teachers and lecturers if they know someone that works at a place that you're interested in. It's all about asking. If you ask for an opportunity, the worst reply that you can get is a no, and you'll survive the no. So it's always worth asking. Got heaps more questions in the Q&A, so we've got another good one. What kind of jobs are available in Australia for nuclear science PhD holders? I would like to know the answer to that one. Does anyone particularly want to tackle that one? That's hard. Sharina, do you want to have a go at that?
Okay, I think having a PhD in nuclear science myself, I think there's actually so many jobs available to us, and we don't really have to look down the narrow path of nuclear. I know there's lots of other industries, like from the finance sector to mining, that are looking for people with PhDs, because really that just, it means that you know how to read and synthesize information, take on large volumes of information and make sense of it as well. So you don't necessarily have to be isolated in the nuclear sector. The other thing I'd say is that my career was by total accident. I didn't actually even know that centralized radiopharmacies played such a big role in the supply of radiopharmaceuticals in Australia. Just kind of getting out there, like Lillian said, asking people in the industry what it is that they do, and trying out different things, being open to different opportunities and taking on as much as you can to get as broad of an experience as you can. And then I think over time, you just fall into the thing that you really have a passion for and that really drives you. And also, I think it was Julie who said that that changes with time as well. So it might not be forever. Yeah.
Thanks, Sharina. Does anyone else want to tackle that question? Julie?
Look, all I say, that there is plenty of roles for those in the nuclear science, as a nuclear science PhD holder. There's lots of research programs in universities. There's lots of, I have no doubt there's lots of government agencies, whether it be state or Commonwealth, that look to do or reach out to PhD holders to assist with work for across a whole range of areas of expertise. So reach out. I'd say reach out to, I'm not too sure where you are, but look at some of those government agencies that are nuclear based, or even just science based, I should say. So CSIRO, and obviously ARPANSA and ANSTO, and they will definitely direct you in the right, on the right pathway if you're looking for those sorts of work.
Sharina, do you have more to add?
Yeah, I just remembered another thing as well. There's also a lot of mentoring programs that are out and that are available that a lot of people don't really know about. There's mentoring programs specifically for women, specifically in science programs and stuff like that. You can just do a search or ask people in your network for what's available. I find LinkedIn is a great resource to connect me with other people that are in the same industry and doing similar things all around the world. So just diversify where you're talking.
Great. Does anyone else have anything else to add before we move on? No. Thanks for that, Sharina. So I would just like to address, I've noticed there's quite a few questions in the Q&A about nuclear energy, and they are good questions, but I just want everyone to know that yesterday we actually hosted a webinar specifically about nuclear energy, and that webinar was recorded. So if you would like to get your hands on that recording so that you can learn a bit more about nuclear, please email us at winaustralia@gmail.com and we can try and hook you up with that recording, and maybe you'll find some answer to your questions there. And if you don't, you can still email your question to us, but I am going to focus on the career-based questions today. So we have a question, an interesting one. The questions move when people upvote them. Okay. What opportunities are there for people with arts or other backgrounds? So law or environmental management or health, social sciences, communications, etc. I think that's a great question. And Katrina, I'm going to pick on you straight away.
Happy to be picked on. Look, I mean, I can only speak to my experience, but certainly the area that I work in within ANSTO, we've got a really passionate group of people. Actually, in our extended team, I'm only aware of one person that comes from a science background. So overwhelmingly, we've got a lot of people with arts degrees, law degrees, communications degrees. So I think there is a real need in the nuclear industry to have people with those diversified skill sets. It's obviously incredibly, incredibly important to have people with STEM skills. But I think a really important part of the puzzle is those, at ANSTO, we refer to them as enablers, for want of a better term, but people who are there to support the researchers in stakeholder engagement, in selling the message, so to speak, communicating the great work that's being done. So I definitely think, and I believe, I mean, from my interactions with ARPANSA, you've got very much the same thing. I would say all, government, that's sort of how it works, that you have people in your government relations and legal and your communications teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can't really speak to the experience in the private sector so much, but I definitely would say there are opportunities out there. And look, I think we need more people with those backgrounds in nuclear.
Definitely. Just the answer I was hoping you'd give. Julie, did you want to add to that? Oh, you're just on mute. Yep.
Right. My only add-on to that is that I am not a scientist and I don't have a science degree or a science background. However, I have education in risk management and in physical protection or protective security, project management, and exactly what Katrina's talking about. Science agencies, nuclear agencies, and whatever it might be, require or need the enabling functions to actually function properly. So we have very good, environmental components, that sort of stuff, communication, government, international relations, and of course we can't ever forget our digital sort of technical services team who actually put all these things together. So there is 110% careers in the nuclear industry or within the nuclear field for non-science people, and I'm one of those people.
Awesome, thank you. Did anyone want to add anything onto that? No? Okay, check Q&A again. We have a few questions that are specifically for Tim and nuclear energy. Maybe we'll have to hunt him down on Twitter so that we can ask him those ones. Okay, this one's specifically for Sharuna. I will add that we are having a webinar specifically about nuclear medicine tomorrow, but while Sharuna is here, it's a good opportunity to ask, can you please give an example of a scenario where nuclear medicine would be used?
Oh, so many. So basically, in nuclear medicine, what you're doing is taking a pharmaceutical and coupling it to a radioactive tracer. Depending on the pharmaceutical that you're using will determine where it's going to biodistribute in your body. So if you wanted to do a scan of someone's brain, for instance, you would find a pharmaceutical that would be taken into the brain, so something that has to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier and be otherwise safe for the patient. And then you have to find the the radioisotope that you're going to couple onto this drug as well. So then there's chemistry around that isotope to make sure that it's able to bind to the pharmaceutical, it stays bound to the pharmaceutical, and once it crosses the blood-brain barrier, it's going to stay in place as well, to give you enough time to image it. So really, there's so many uses for nuclear medicine. It just depends on what part of the organ you want, what part of the body you want to look at. We have different types of scans for how your heart functions, how your lungs function, all kinds of things.
Cool, thanks for that. Questions in the chat are a bit more general. There is one question that I'll just answer. Someone has asked, is there a way for someone with a background in geology and an interest in science communication to find work at ANSTO? I'm just going to say absolutely. Google ANSTO. There are heaps of geology applications at ANSTO. You'll be blown away. I think I might ask a question from my list just to keep us on the career path. And funny enough, I'm going to ask a question about career paths. We may have already answered these a little bit in our discussion, but I was wondering if everyone could kind of talk us through their career path from high school onwards. Maybe Julie, do you want to start that one off? Did you tackle that one when I dropped out?
Yeah, I did, but I certainly didn't start from the high school days. That seems a lifetime ago, and I certainly wish I was sitting, or I had the opportunity to sit in a webinar like this and listen to, you know, an area of expertise or an industry that I find very, very interesting right now. But so going from school days, no, I had no idea that I would ever sit in a nuclear sort of career or position. I was a female football player, played professionally, and for the Australian women's national team for many, many years. So kind of school and those sorts of things effectively were secondary. But in saying that, school was very important, and I always did my homework. Yeah. So you know, like I said before, I always get asked, why? How on earth did you get into to be a security expert when you're a professional football player? And I would say, well, your guess is as good as mine. But the main crux of it was that I actually had some real genuine interest in national security. And I won't go on and bore you to death because I've already sort of said it. It took me to the Department of Defence, which brought me to ARPANSA, and that's where I've continued to stay and grow personally and obviously from a career perspective. So that's sort of me in a very, very short nutshell.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And I really hope, if anything, people get out of this webinar that everyone who is here today, that the career paths are very varied. Like, there is not one way to a specific job, and I think we're all putting that on display. Tim, would you like to talk us through beginning to where you are now?
Yeah, briefly. So I did a double degree in mechanical engineering and physics at UNSW. What I'll say about that is that there's a shortage of engineers probably in Australia, but if you know you're really interested in something, you've got to hustle. So study hard. I got first class honours for my engineering degree, and I got into the ANSTO graduate program in 2011. After 2 years on the graduate program, coincidentally, ops at Opal and ANSTO were running reactor operator training. So I literally just went up and asked the operations manager, Jason, can I join this training? He said, yeah. So I trained as a reactor operator, and I worked there as a reactor operator for 3 years. After getting enough experience and training, I qualified as a shift manager, where I worked for 2 years in the control room at ANSTO. During that time, I'd studied part-time at UNSW. I did the Masters in Nuclear Engineering. And in 2017, I attended the World Nuclear University Summer Institute in Uppsala in Sweden. And there I sort of found out about Fennovoima and the project. When I got back home, I literally went on the website and applied online and did some Skype interviews, and then I moved to Helsinki. So yeah, it's possible.
Awesome.
If you just go for it. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Sharuna, do you want to step us through your career path?
Yeah, well, my career was, I think, completely by accident, really. When I finished high school, I didn't know what I wanted to study, but I knew I wanted to go to university. So I was going through the university guide and found this this course called Nuclear Medicine, which had subjects that I thought I liked at the time, like biology, physics, a little bit of chemistry. So I signed up to the course, and about halfway through discovered radiopharmacy, which is a core topic in the course. Did some research, like Tim says, about radiopharmacies, found that one of the largest centralized radiopharmacies in Australia is in Sydney. So called them up and like knocked on their door, and I was like, do you have something for me to do? I'm a student, I'm happy to work in the lab and learn as I go. And probably because I was harassing them, they gave me a job in the lab, and I just worked through the industry through there. Like I started off not even having a radiation license and doing, you know, all of the unpacking jobs, and you know, like getting stuff organized for people who did have a license to radiation, until I studied far enough and got my license, and then moved up through the different chains in radiopharmaceuticals, like everything from the radiation safety aspects to the logistics of transportation, because that's another thing that Julie probably knows more about. But licensing for logistics and transportation of radiopharmaceuticals is complex and challenging. And then all the way to the regulatory aspects of the quality of the product and the impact to the patient. So it wasn't, I can't say that I had any plan or idea of where I wanted to get to. I just kept doing things that I enjoyed doing, and kept investigating down paths that I thought were interesting. And so far I've enjoyed it up until, well, I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that really highlights the importance of getting your foot in the door when you can, even if it's not a position that is your end goal or the position that you're dreaming of. If you can get your foot in the door in a small role, like you said, just helping out in the lab, that can really lead to big things later on. And I can attest to that. Katrina, would you like to step us through?
I think I sort of already bored everyone with my journey from psych to international relations. The only comment I'll add, which I sort of left off the discussion before, is I've now almost finished my MBA. So I guess that continued development. Don't they always talk about like having, you know, all these different careers in your lifetime? I enjoy nuclear greatly, don't get me wrong, but I think that would just be my encouragement to people who are considering their career, is don't necessarily think it has to stop with the initial field that you studied in. I've found, you know, it might sound a bit counterintuitive doing an MBA when I work in government, but I think it's been really interesting to bring that government lens to sort of those leadership and business problems, and it's been a great experience.
Yep, thank you for that. So there is a question in the chat that I thought was a good one. What do you enjoy most about your careers now? That is a good question. Julie, I'm going to ask you first.
Well, let's see. Okay, so I mean, apart from the people, you spend most of your life, you know, with your work colleagues. But I think just sort of reflecting, just even on the conversations and bring to the forefront that you've got all this experience that starts off, and at my age, not that I'm super old, but it's actually being able to, you know, apply, you know, all the experience and the knowledge that you've learned over the last 10, 20, 30 years, or whatever it might be, all the education, everything coming together, particularly now in my career, where you can see things come to fruition. You're thinking, you're well considered, and you're able to provide or contribute to, you know, successful outcomes in the agency, and also obviously that translates or transfers to, you know, human health or human impacts and the environment. So that's where you see it. You don't necessarily see it when you're in it and you're doing it, but then there are obvious health or human, you know, health impacts in the positive side for what we do, or what I do, and what our agency does. And obviously there's a lot more agencies that do that as well. So that's probably the greatest sort of thing that I get out of it.
Awesome, thanks, Julie. Tim, do you want to tell us the favourite part of your job?
Yeah, I've probably got two. I'd first like to echo what Julie said. I'm only coming up on sort of 10 years of career experience now, but I feel really fortunate in the role that I'm in now, in a kind of new build, new project, new company, we're working with, in our company, we hire quite a lot of people who haven't had experience in the nuclear industry before, who haven't worked with necessarily with ionizing radiation before. So it's great to be able to bring the experience that I've had from working at Opal and ANSTO to our project. As well, maybe this is kind of specific to working overseas, but being a native English speaker in a company with the working language as English, but for everybody else it's basically a second language, it's a real privilege. You're able to take really good notes, and it's a role that you can fit really well into building consensus, to trying and support the conversation from everyone whose view you want to get on a different issue.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tim. Sharuna, what's the favorite part of your job?
I think definitely two things as well. I would say the problem-solving aspect of my role. So it's not that challenges arise every day. Mostly the function of my role is to make things so routine that things follow a particular path from A to B to C without any deviation at all. But on the occasion where there is something out of the ordinary, I find the investigation really interesting and challenging. Because you're working with a time-sensitive pharmaceutical as well, there's time pressures for you to investigate and make decisions. So there's a bit of an adrenaline rush there as well, I think. The second thing that I find really interesting at the moment, and where nuclear medicine is at a space right now, is changes in technology and the potential implications and interactions that means for our jobs and our day jobs, and how we can improve things that we do that may be potentially better for the easier on the environment than old methods were. And I think that's going to be the next part of where we grow and develop as well.
Awesome, thank you for that. And then Katrina, lucky last, what's the favorite part of your job?
I can't narrow it down to one, so I'm just going to give my top three here. So definitely the variety. I'm one of those people who I do tend to get bored if I'm working on one project for too long. So I think a great thing about my role is there's always capacity to switch it up, move on to something else, come back to that task later, which is just for the way I work, really awesome. As I mentioned, I am a people person at heart. So the stakeholder engagement side of my role is something that I just genuinely enjoy. And finally, and maybe this is just because it's not happening at the moment, but the travel. And I don't say that to be flippant, but I'm one of those people who really learns by experiencing and doing. So the opportunities that I've had to go overseas and you know, in Asia or Europe that's been, you know, deeply related to a project that I'm working on, that understanding of ground knowledge is just transformative for me. It really does lift a problem off the page. And really inspires me to find the way forward. So that for me is a real privilege in my role, and something I hope that can be revisited once we're sort of on the other side of COVID.
Fantastic, thanks Katrina. So we have like 5 minutes left, probably time for one more question. There's a question in the chat that I really like, I think particularly for any younger viewers, maybe high school level or just starting uni, that I think this question would be really good for. How important is networking in starting a career in nuclear? How can students at high school or uni start networking with nuclear professionals? Now, I also have an answer to this question, but do the panel have an answer for this question? I think it's a great question. Okay. I'm going to give it 2 seconds and then, okay, go Katrina.
Sorry, you get to hear from me again. I love networking. Probably not surprising at this point. However, I guess I've worked with a lot of our researchers at ANSTO around how you you build your networks. And I guess a couple of pieces of feedback here, be really proactive. And I certainly think it's never too young to start. Definitely, you know, I don't think there's an age limit on getting a LinkedIn profile going. I think you can do that when you're still in high school. And then really start targeting who you're going to reach out to. It's a really great tool to have. I think what I would maybe caution against is, like, of course you want to network in your target industry. That's how you're going to get the internships. That's how you're going to get the jobs. But don't cut yourself off too early into this is the niche or this is the field. I think something that I've really come to appreciate is the diversity of my network. So what I mean by that is, at this point, I have, you know, people in all different countries, in nuclear, but also in cyber policy, in human rights law, in, you know, all of these different fields. And you know, not saying I necessarily need to contact them in my role at ANSTO. I don't, for the most part, but it's great to know that they're there as a resource. And I know certainly during my MBA, some of them have got like a 3 a.m. email from me with some random questions. So you never know. And I guess just what I'm trying to impress here in summary is, because you never know at the outset exactly where your career is going to lead, don't sort of back yourself into a corner saying these are the specific people. Definitely engage with them, but keep your options open, because I think what 2020 has really demonstrated for all of us, right, is that there is so much uncertainty. I mean, there always has been, but it's really brought it to the fore. And unfortunately, I think for young people starting out in their careers now, that's going to be something that's felt even more prominently in the coming years. So yeah, network widely. And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to people.
Yeah, fantastic advice. I think I will add, can't help myself, just to sort of the theme of getting your foot in the door and getting yourself known. So when I was at the very end of high school, I hadn't started uni yet. I got some work experience at ANSTO, and I did that as a high school student by looking on I think it was a field trip that we had to ANSTO. I decided what things ANSTO did that I really liked, that I thought was really awesome. And then I emailed someone that worked there back and forth, telling them, I'm really interested in what you do. I'm only in high school, but I really want to have a go at doing that to see if I like it and what it's like. And I ended up getting work experience. And from that work experience, I mean, I'm an honours researcher there now, and I work for ANSTO. So, you know, like, I didn't plan for that when I was in high school, but that's just what can happen if you start small, start by asking for 2 weeks work experience somewhere, reaching out, getting your name known, exchanging emails, people at that workplace learn your name. So then when you ask for something later, they're familiar with you. All those things make a difference. So my advice is always, don't hold back from reaching out. And on that note, I'm going to have to, oh, Sharuna, yes? We have 2 minutes.
I just wanted to add to what you're saying about reaching out, that I've always wondered that, you know, am I annoying people, or are they too busy for me? But more and more, I find that people are incredibly generous with their time, and they will make time for you if you have a question for them. I find it very difficult to go to networking events, because you get there and you don't know who to talk to or what to say, and you know, but that's just my personality. But I do find that when I have reached out to other radiochemists in the industry to say to them, hey, you know, I've come across this, can you help me out? They have been extremely generous with their time.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100%. There is 1 minute left. I do just want to mention, if there are any students in the audience at the moment who are thinking, career in nuclear sounds awesome, research in nuclear sounds awesome, ANSTO, I'm going to plug the place that I work for. Our job is to supply students from undergrad all the way to early career researchers with scholarships to do research at ANSTO in nuclear science. And that answers the question earlier about we have students who are in geology, biology, material science. It's really broad. So I would just say, give us a Google. Google ANSTO, Google ANSTO, ask your lecturers, ask your teachers if you're at high school, what opportunities are out there, and see what you can get connected with and what you can apply for and who you can email. So I am going to have to end our webinar here for today. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us. And I hope the audience learnt as much as I did. I always find career panels really useful, even if I'm hosting them, because I get to steal some information for myself. So if you didn't get to have your questions answered today, please email us at winaustralia@gmail.com and we will try and get you connected with the right person to answer that question. You can also find Women in Nuclear on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn, so you can try and connect with us there. So when you close this webinar today, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey. So this survey is not for Women in Nuclear. It's for researchers from the Science, Communication, Outreach, Participation and Education group at the University of Sydney, who are conducting a study into the experiences of science communication events as part of National Science Week. So if you can fill that out, that would be fantastic. I'm going to put a slide up with our email address, but other than that, that is the end of this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Please don't hesitate to email. Thank you, everyone. I'll leave the slide up for a few seconds if you want to write that down. Thanks, everyone.